What's up, everybody? I'm Noah. Welcome back to Madison Angling. We have another episode of Shop Talk here at D&S Bait, Tackle, and Fly Shop here on the north side of Madison. And this is kind of a different video. We're going to be talking about some really cool stuff from back in the day. And before we even get going, guys, comment below if you've been perch fishing on Lake Mendota before. Maybe you grew up doing it. Maybe you're just now getting into it, but if you have some history fishing Lake Mendota for perch, share your experiences down below, especially if you did it way back in the day, 60s, 70s, 80s, even the 90s, early 2000s. We'd love to hear your stories because it was a pretty crazy kind of iconic perch fishery, which obviously has changed a lot, and there's probably a direct correlation between how it used to be and how it is now and why the numbers are what they are. But the perch fishing is coming back, guys. But this week's video, we're going to be talking about kind of the history of perch fishing here in Madison, and specifically showcasing some of the really cool equipment that people used to use and some people still use to this day to catch those fish in deep water. So we're going to have Pat jump in here and give the rundown on some of this cool history, because he grew up doing this, I grew up doing this, and it's pretty darn cool, and we want to share it with you guys. So let's get into it.
All right, so what we have here in front of us, these are what they call swish rods, and these are perch rods that they used back in the day. I couldn't even tell you when these originated, but they are a very interesting part of the history of fishing for perch on Lake Mendota. What they are is, and these have a little label on them, it says Mendota rod. I don't know who made these or where they come from, but basically what it is this looks like an old pool cue for a handle down here, and then maybe the end of a broken rod, who knows. They got some huge eyelets on, and then down here, this is a really cool part. This is your reel, which is actually an old film reel. So with the old film that they used to have back in the day. They'd have the empty film reels, and they use these, and it's a great way to pick up a whole bunch of line when you're fishing in this deep water. But it's just a really neat and really a pretty creative solution to finding these deep water perch. On this rod over here, we have what is come to be known as the Mendota Rig. People also call them pencil weights or perch sinkers. We're going to talk a little bit about the modern version of these, but you can see this thing is just a behemoth of a weight. And I mean, you can see there, that's a lot of weight to get a jig down there, but it is effective for getting a weight down to where the perch are, which, you know, in some cases out here in Mendota could be even as deep as 80 feet of water. So yeah, these are a really neat part of perch fishing in the Madison area that, yeah, it's great to see that some of these are still around, and like Noah said, folks do still use these. So yeah, it's pretty great.
All right, guys, so Pat and I are switching spots here. Pat did an awesome job explaining the swish rod and kind of the story behind it. And I'm going to show you guys kind of the business end of it, and that is using perch weights, which are kind of goofy. And you guys may have seen this as Pat was talking about these rods. You know, this thing is gigantic. This is probably the biggest perch weight I've ever seen in my life, and I'm probably getting cancer the more I touch it. I might be dead by the time you guys see this video because of this weight, but you might be wondering, why do you need something this big to catch perch? And it kind of goes along with the swish rod, right? We're fishing in deep water, and people still do that today. And we're going to talk about that here in a minute and how technology's kind of changed that. But to get your bait down to where those fish are, we're perch fishing, right? We're using little tiny jigs, right? We got our little rat finkies here, these little tiny dudes. How are you going to get that thing down 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, even 80 feet at times with a big stinking weight? So we actually have a handful of perch weights here, and Pat has a whole bunch of these in stock. So if you guys want them, he's got them. And it's kind of a really niche-y item. You can't find these everywhere, but we got this big old copper boy, and actually all of these are made out of copper. Basically, it's a copper tube that has some weight inside of it, whether it's lead or some BBs or something to kind of weight it. It's crimped off at the ends, and we got a swivel on each end. So the way these work, and I know if you're not familiar with this, it's gonna weird you out, but this is a Mendota Perch Rig right here, and it's full on glory. You'll notice we got our weight here. We've got a little leader. This is probably like 4-pound mono. You can use 2, 3, 4, 6-pound, whatever, fluoro mono, doesn't matter. Honestly, the fish are not that spooky because they're coming up and eating something underneath a big black thing that's about 6 inches above the jig. So don't worry about your line diameter. Down to our rat finky. That is like the OG perch killer on Lake Mendota, even to this day. And we'll talk more about those in just a second. So you might be looking at this thing and wondering, why is there like this little washer here? And on this weight, there's this little taper, this little cone. It looks like a golf tee almost, right? What is that doing on there? And what that's for is actually for your sonar. So when you're fishing in super deep water, obviously we're using these tiny little jigs. You're not gonna see that thing down there on your Vexlar or your Humminbird or Garmin, whatever it is you like to use for ice fishing. So what that does is it basically increases the surface area widthwise on the perch weight so you can see this thing when you get it down to depth, right? You're marking where the fish are. You're maybe not gonna mark when a fish is actually coming up to eat your jig, but you'll at least know in relation to the school of fish you're marking out in deep water where your presentation is in the water column. So you know you're at least close. Then at that point, you're waiting to feel a bite or see a bite on your rod or just a blind hook set and bam, you got one. So one of the keys to this rig is making sure that this dropper line is not longer than the weight in total. So this one's maybe just a smidge on the long side, maybe a 1/4 inch longer than I would typically fish. But the reason for that is when you drop this thing down and it's plummeting down 10, 20, 30 plus feet, right? This jig is gonna spin around and twist and stuff. And if it gets caught on your main line, you're gonna get down there and have this great big tangle that isn't gonna catch you any fish. Meanwhile, your buddy next to you is absolutely piss pounding them, right? And you're sitting down there not getting any action because your leader's too long, it got fouled up. So making sure you keep this shorter than the total length of your perch weight will ensure that it's not gonna get tangled and you're actually gonna catch fish. So, like we said, the rat finky. So we're gonna defer to Gene here. For those of you not familiar, Gene is the previous owner of DNS, recently retired, and Gene actually used to run guide trips out of here on Lake Mendota for perch for years and years and years. And Pat, when he was kind of tearing around the back room, found a lot of his old rods that he used for guide trips. And in case you guys were wondering what color is hot on Lake Mendota, we'll just take a look at Gene's pile of jigs here. And I'm seeing a lot of white with glow, black on black, and purple's another really good one, purple on purple. And these are just custom jigs and spins rat finkies. These have been around forever. And as far as tipping these goes, a lot of guys like spikes, wax worms. I've even seen people put crappie minnow heads on these before, which seems a little silly. If you're gonna go that route, you might as well use a spoon or something with a bigger hook. But just a simple rat finky with either a spike or a waxy on it is just a killer combination, right, Gene? If he started talking, I'd be pretty worried about it. By the way, guys, when you come into some of these smaller shops, just look around. Like, check this out, Pat. Show them what you got going on here. We got all kinds of cool old baits and stuff, old reels, old taxidermy. I mean, dude, there's a dogfish. There's a freaking taxidermized, if that's even a word, bowfin hanging out up there. That stuff's super cool. You don't get that at your big chain bait shops. You know, I'm not gonna name drop any of them, but you know who I'm talking about. You find that stuff at shops like this. So just even more incentive to come in and check this stuff out. Like the Swish rods. These were hanging up as a display piece and we were like, we should talk about those because it's a cool piece of history, especially here in the Madison chain. So come in and check this stuff out, guys. Another thing, by the time you guys are seeing this, we're probably getting into the late ice season. The perch fishing is gonna get ridiculously good. Now that being said, I am not running guide trips this winter. However, my buddy Brian Zubke and Austin Rogotsky are running trips. So if you guys wanna get out with those guys, I will have their info linked in the description below, or you can always call the shop. Pat or whoever's working can hook you up with a guide, whether it's me or one of those guys, and get out and do some fishing, guys. So with that, that is this week's Shop Talk video, and I want you guys to drop some comments below. Let us know your story. Maybe you grew up fishing here, or used to come from out of state to fish Mendota. Let's talk about it. Let me know your experiences, and let me know your thoughts on the limits. So that's another thing I was going to touch on here is the bag limits, right? Used to be unlimited. You could go out and just pound on perch, right? And then it was 50 fish a person, and then it's 25, which it currently is. And it sounds like it may even be changing to a 10 fish limit here in the near future on Lake Mendota. So let me know your thoughts on that. What do you guys think about the management strategy? Obviously, if you fished back in the day, you know how good it was, but the problem was there were so many people who'd go out in the morning, catch their limit of fish, and then go back out in the afternoon, catch another limit of fish, and I guarantee you some of those people still have bags of fish from 1998 sitting in their freezer. I wonder where all the perch went. It wasn't the pike, it wasn't the walleyes. So just something to keep in mind, guys. Selective harvest, using your electronics responsibly. And another thing to add too is barotrauma. You're fishing in deep water, we're using these big weights to get down there. If you're catching 6-inch perch, they're probably all gonna be 6-inch perch, so move. Those fish are going to die. And one of the ethical things to do would either be to keep them, I know it's a small little chunk of meat, but keep them or at least count those fish towards your daily bag limit. They are not going to survive. You can't fizz them, they're dead. So just something to keep in mind, guys. But that being said, please go out and enjoy these lakes. They're for everybody. Stop into DNS, get loaded up with your perch stuff, and Pat's got you covered on the weights, the rods, the reels, the line, the jigs, all of it. So stop on down, guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. We'll see you on the next episode.